Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are focusing on 2 decades that, really did reshape America. We're talking about the crucial groundwork of the civil rights movement between 1940 and 1960.
Right, because people often jump straight to the 1960s.
Exactly, the big marches, the famous legislation. But all of that, the legal strategy, the political leverage, it was all built brick by brick during the 40s and 50s. So our mission for you today is to unpack how activists started transforming American society then by challenging segregation and setting the stage for what came next.
And you have to start with this core contradiction, because it's really the engine for the whole movement. The U.S. comes out of World War II as this, global champion of democracy.
The leader of the free world.
The leader of the free world, exactly. But at the same time, at home, you have this incredibly violent systemic racial oppression. And that gap, the hypocrisy, is what civil rights leaders learned to weaponize.
And to really get how deep that hypocrisy was, we have to rewind a bit to the unfulfilled promises after the Civil War. I'm talking about the Reconstruction Amendments.
The 13th, 14th, and 15th.
Right. They promised freedom, equal protection, voting rights. They were supposed to be the law of the land, but they weren't.
No, not at all. Jim Crow was, it was designed with this almost meticulous cruelty to just gut those amendments. It was a two-pronged attack, really.
Okay, so what's the first prong?
First is just blatant state-sponsored segregation everywhere. Schools, buses, restaurants, neighborhoods, you name it.
And the second?
The second was arguably even more destructive, voter suppression. Because if you can't vote, you have no power to change the laws that are oppressing you.
And they had all sorts of insidious tactics for this.
Oh, absolutely. Poll taxes, which were basically a fee to vote. You had literacy tests, which were, subjectively designed to fail black voters.
And then there was the grandfather clause.
The grandfather clauses, which conveniently exempted poor and illiterate white voters from those tests. And all of it was backed by the threat of violence from groups like the Klan.
And this wasn't just local custom. The Supreme Court itself gave it a rubber stamp.
Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896.
The disastrous separate but equal doctrine. It gave legal cover to segregation for more than 50 years. So you have this huge legal and moral flaw at home. But how is the rest of the world starting to see this?
Well, the Soviet Union saw it as a gold mine. Pure propaganda gold.
The Cold War angle.
The Cold War angle is critical. As things ramp up, the U.S. is broadcasting messages of freedom, and the Soviets just had to point to a white-only sign in Washington, D.C. It was devastatingly effective propaganda.
So it completely reframes the whole issue.
It does. And the civil rights leaders were incredibly smart about this. They started arguing that segregation wasn't just a moral problem, it was a national security threat.
A strategic liability.
A huge one.
Yeah.
If you want to win over these new independent nations in Africa and Asia, you can't be seen as a racial oppressor at home. Equality suddenly becomes a strategic imperative.
Which changes the stakes for Washington completely. But of course, none of this high-level political maneuvering would matter without people on the ground.
Right, the grassroots power.
So let's shift there. When we talk about Montgomery, we all know Rosa Parks, December 1955.
Yeah.
But you have to remember Claudette Colvin.
Yes. 9 months earlier.
9 months earlier, March 1955. She refused to give up her seat, and she was only 15 years old. Her case was actually one of the ones that led to the final legal victory. It showed that this was built on everyday courage.
And that courage sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. And it's one of the most incredible examples of coordinated resistance in American history. Think about it, 381 days.
An entire year without public transit.
It was economic warfare. That bus system nearly went bankrupt. And the coordination it took, carpools, people walking miles to work day in and day out under constant threat. That's what led to the federal court ruling, Browder v. Gale, which finally ended by segregation.
So that boycott proved the power of mass action, but you need structure for that kind of action. An organization like CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, they were founded way back in 1942.
CORE was so important. They were the architects of nonviolent direct action long before it became mainstream. Their whole philosophy was, challenge segregation directly, publicly, but nonviolently.
They were kind of field testing the playbook.
Exactly. They were organizing sit-ins and early freedom rides, voter registration drives.
Yeah.
They were building the foundation for the 60s.
And beyond the political organizing, you have these huge cultural shifts. You can't overstate the symbolic power of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in baseball in 1947.
Absolutely not.
Just seeing a black man competing at the highest level, facing that unbelievable hostility, and winning respect through sheer talent, that had a psychological impact that you can't measure. It just chipped away at those racist ideas.
And all this pressure from the grassroots and from the global stage, it starts forcing Washington to act, finally. You see President Truman step in.
Right, he established the Committee on Civil Rights in 46.
But the really big move was his Executive Order 9981 in 1948.
Desegregating the U.S. military.
Which was massive. I mean, after fighting world wars and segregated units, this was a huge, concrete step from the very top. It said that racial division undermined the country's mission.
So that brings us to the central battleground of this era, the courts, and the NAACP's legal strategy led by the brilliant Thurgood Marshall.
Marshall's strategy was genius. He didn't try to take down Plessy all at once. First, he just focused on the equal part of separate but equal.
Forcing states to prove their segregated facilities were actually equal.
Which, of course, they never were. Though he pivoted to arguing that separation itself was inherently unequal.
And there was a key test case for that argument, right? Mendez v. Westminster in 1947.
Yes, in California. It challenged segregation for Mexican-American students. And the court found that segregation caused harm, period, even if the schools were technically equal.
So that gave Marshall the legal lever he needed.
It showed him the path, and it all led to the knockout blow. Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. The Supreme Court finally overturns Plessy in public schools. An absolute earthquake.
And it was so big that Congress was finally forced to act, even if it was reluctantly. You get the Civil Rights Act of 1957.
The first one since Reconstruction. It was pretty weak, to be honest.
It was weak, but it did establish the Civil Rights Commission and gave the Justice Department some power to protect voting rights. It signaled that all three branches were now, at least on paper, in the game.
But here's where we hit the wall of reality. A legal victory is one thing. Enforcing it is another. The moment Brown was decided, the resistance organized.
And the Supreme Court gave them an opening.
A huge one. In their follow-up ruling, they said desegregation should happen with all deliberate speed.
Which basically means whenever you feel like it.
Exactly. It was a gift to segregationists. It allowed southern states to stall, to delay, to evade for years. Some even closed public schools rather than integrate them.
And the political backlash was intense. The Southern Manifesto in 1956.
Right. You have dozens of congressmen and senators signing a document that just condemns the Brown decision, calls it judicial overreach, and encourages states to resist it by all lawful means.
This wasn't quiet resistance. This was open defiance from federal lawmakers.
Which led to the ultimate constitutional crisis in 1957, Little Rock.
The Little Rock Nine. Governor Orville Faubus uses the Arkansas National Guard to physically block 9 black students from entering Central High School, a state government using military force to defy the Supreme Court.
And President Eisenhower, who was pretty reluctant to get involved, had his hand forced. He had no choice. He had to send in federal troops, the 101st Airborne, to escort those kids into school.
Which proved a crucial point.
An essential one. That legal victories mean nothing without the federal will, and sometimes federal force, to back them up against state resistance.
So if you pull all these threads together, the 40s and 50s really show you that progress required this triple threat.
That's a great way to put it. You needed Marshall's meticulous legal strategy, you needed executive action like Truman's and Eisenhower's, and you needed that powerful, sustained grassroots mobilization, like in Montgomery, to force everyone's hand.
And to loop back to where we started, with voter suppression, the poll taxes, and literacy tests, the work done in this era did eventually pay off. The calls for federal action laid the groundwork for the 24th Amendment.
Which finally abolished the poll tax in 1964. It took a long time, but it got there.
It did. We've seen how framing segregation as a Cold War liability made it an urgent issue for the federal government. So we'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. What major social movement today benefits most from being framed not just as a moral issue, but as a strategic necessity for America's global credibility?